With so much spotlight on retro gaming these days, little is unknown. As more and more people become interested in the hobby, the encyclopedic wealth of knowledge about even the most obscure games of yesteryear grows even larger. This makes finding a game that appears apparently unknown to even the dustiest corners of the internet repositories even more intriguing. That's what we have here. RAYTHUND is a game I'd never come across or even heard of until browsing through listings on a reputable online marketplace. My attention was grabbed by a gorgeous looking multicolored Game Boy box with a picture of a fighter pilot on it. I immediately dove into my usual go-to sages, i.e. Google, for details, and everywhere I looked, every one of my knowledgeable minions I consulted came up short. The only info I could find is everything that you see in that little box up there. The developer, release date, product code, and the fact that it's a Japanese exclusive. As you can imagine, I was fascinated. So much so that I had to download a ROM in lieu of the game arriving in the mail. So what's this game about? Well, I'm not sure. I have the manual, but of course I can't really read it. The artwork from the box isn't very helpful, it turns out. You're not in a fighter plane for one thing. The first thought I had was a throwback to the 1990 Electro Brain title Bionic Battler. This is a first-person shooting maze game. I don't think you're a person, though, whereby over 21 arenas you have to collect a certain number of parts, little tin cans with a P on them, or clear each of the enemies. Some levels won't have any parts to find, so you'll just have to destroy everything, and it's one or the other. Collect all the parts and you beat the stage. The enemies themselves are varied. Some are these mecha suit cyborgs that I imagine you yourself are. Understand my confusion in that you never actually see yourself. Whereas some are floating droids or other forms of mechanical constructs. They don't really come after you as such, nothing so intelligent as that. Rather, some of them patrol around in a small route back and forth or round in circles, and some lie in wait to spring out once they see you. Fortunately, you're not blind. Pressing select in-game brings up a map of the closest area of the maze, and if you're in proximity, around 4 or 5 tile space to an enemy, a dot will appear on the map. You'll also hear a sound like a bouncy ball that gets louder the closer it gets, and also uses the stereophonic nature of the Game Boy to pinpoint a direction. There aren't many examples of that which spring to mind. It's pretty cool. Select is not just your map, you'll be pressing this a lot. On this screen is information about remaining enemies and parts, but also your fuel and damage. The levels aren't timed, but you have a limited fuel supply that drops as you move. There are a few restocks, but these dwindle as the game goes on. There are also health pickups, but these too are quite rare. The thing about this map screen is the game doesn't actually pause when you're looking at it. You yourself can't move, but the enemies are still patrolling their predetermined pathways and will still shoot you if they see you. Just be cautious and you shouldn't get sprung upon. In terms of controls, left and right rotate you through 90 degrees, and up moves you forward 1 space. Annoyingly, down doesn't move you backwards. It makes you briefly look downwards, which, as far as I can tell, doesn't serve a purpose. You don't have to look at the ground to pick things up, you just step on them. Occasionally there are landmines or other traps, but these are pretty visible anyway, and it would be kind of useful not to have to spin a 180 to go back the way you came, especially when being attacked. A fires your weapon, but B does nothing. Some limited use secondary weapon like a bomb or missile would have been nice. Sometimes it'll seem that there's an enemy out of reach. This happens notably on the second level, whereby, according to the map, the thing's walking around a closed off area. You can hear it distantly and see it on your radar, but there appears to be no way to get to the blighter. You now need to find a keycard to unlock a path, and these are not marked on your map. It'd be kind of pointless if they were, as I guess it's supposed to be a kind of exploration element, but they're not usually too hard to find. There's barely any music in this title, and none in-game at all, but the sound effects do a really good job of setting an atmosphere. What I first thought were your character's footsteps actually seem to be a kind of heartbeat, rhythmic and intermittent. Once you make that connection, the game becomes that little bit more tense. The use of volume and stereo sound for the approach of the enemies is executed brilliantly as well. a very subtle and skillful use of a small handful of sounds. That was surely the name of the game here, as evidenced by the look of the whole thing. No scenery save the slab walls of the mazes, but a very smooth 3D effect with an impressive draw distance that allows you to see a good 3 or 4 spans ahead of you. I really like RAYTHUND. I've no idea what the story is, but it almost doesn't matter. I've sort of made my own premise up, and in a way I like the game better for that. It doesn't need to be understood. The language of the manual and lack of any English information on the web, transcended by what is a delicately crafted little beauty. One of the happiest accidents I've ever come across in my collecting journey. Thanks so much for watching this video. Let me know your thoughts on the game down below, and if you can spare a second, give the review a quick thumbs up, it really helps out. Subscribe to the Portable Power Podcast for a new Game Boy review every day from Monday to Friday. Or alternately, new episodes of the podcast drop every Saturday and Sunday on whichever platform you get your pods. See you later on.